Beyblade has had a lot of main characters throughout the years. From the original series all the way to modern day X, we've seen completely different kinds of protagonists. Characters like Tyson Granger, Jinya Hagane, and Jason Cross all represent different eras of Beyblade and different ideas of what a main character should be. But since this is a Beyblade Burst channel, today I want to focus on what is potentially the defining protagonist of that generation, Valt Aoi. In this video, I want to take a deep dive into what Valt actually symbolises and the themes that surround him throughout his time as the main protagonist. Because of that, this analysis will mainly focus on Beyblade Burst and Beyblade Burst Evolution, since those two seasons form the core of Valt's character arc. If you guys enjoy this video though, I'd definitely love to make a follow-up talking about Valt in his later appearances and how his role changes once he's no longer the main focus of the story. Also, a special thank you to TYTY for inspiring this video. When I read your comment, I instantly knew there was something really interesting to explore here, so hopefully this video does that idea justice, for you and for anyone else watching. Now then, let's begin our deep dive into the Wonder Boy himself, Valt Aoi. When most people think about Valt Aoi, the first thing they usually remember is his energy. He's loud, impulsive, constantly excited, and almost always running headfirst into whatever challenges come in front of him. On the surface, Valt seems like a pretty standard Beyblade protagonist, but I think what makes him interesting is why he keeps moving forward. Valt's determination is completely different from a lot of characters in Beyblade. He isn't driven by revenge like Shu was during his Red Eye era, he isn't a constant symbol of raw power and strength like Xander was, and he definitely isn't just finding joy in winning like Free De La Hoya. Valt is a lot simpler than that. He just wants to meet his friends at the national tournament. And that sounds simple, but it's actually the foundation of his entire character. From the very beginning of Burst, Valt is constantly losing. He struggles to control Valtryek properly, his launches are inconsistent, and compared to bladers like Shu or Louis, he looks completely inexperienced. The series never tries to portray him as secretly overpowered or naturally above anyone else either. Instead, Burst makes Valt feel very human. He gets frustrated, he makes reckless decisions, sometimes he loses because he lets his emotions take over. But what separates him from other characters is how he responds to failure. Valt never treats losing as humiliation. He treats it as motivation. Every defeat pushes him to improve rather than break him down emotionally. That's why his determination feels genuine instead of forced. The audience watches someone fail repeatedly, but continue moving forward because of his passion for Beyblade is stronger than his fear of losing. And I think that's why Valt connected with so many people during Burst's run. He represents the idea that passion itself can become strength. A lot of characters in Burst approach Beyblade very differently. Shu approaches it with discipline and perfection, Louis approaches it with dominance and overwhelming power, but Valt approaches it with joy. For him, Beyblade is exciting, it's something that brings people together. That emotional openness is one of his greatest strengths as a protagonist in my opinion. Even when he loses, Valt's enthusiasm never disappears. In fact, some of the moments where he grows the most happen immediately after big defeats. Instead of shutting himself off emotionally, he becomes even more determined to understand what made him weaker and how he can improve. A perfect example of this was his defeat to Louis at the end of the first season. Valt had every reason to win that battle. He wanted to get back at Louis for destroying Spriggan, and he had all that momentum after beating two other members of the Supreme Four. But he doesn't. He loses from a scratch of his own creation. But instead of quitting Bladers like some other characters did, or forgoing his personality for a stronger persona entirely, he chooses to essentially start all over again. And that determination slowly becomes contagious. His teammates, rivals, and even complete strangers become inspired by the way he approaches competition. Valt doesn't battle to win, he battles because he genuinely loves the experience itself. That's what makes his determination feel different. It doesn't come from pride or passion, and throughout Burst and Evolution, that passion becomes the thing that pushes him from an inexperienced blader into someone capable of standing at the top of the world. And that's where one of Burst's biggest strengths comes into play, because Valt's growth never feels automatic. Every step forward has to be earned. One of the biggest reasons Valt works as a protagonist is because Beyblade Burst never allows his growth to feel unearned. The series constantly reminds the audience that Valt is not the most naturally talented blader in the room. When you compare him to characters like Shu, Free, and Louis, or even to the likes of Daigo or Wakia, Valt intentionally feels messy. His techniques aren't refined at first, his decision making can be reckless, and there are some moments where his emotions completely control the outcome of a battle. But that's exactly why his progress feels satisfying. Burst places a huge emphasis on effort, repetition, and training. Valt doesn't become stronger overnight. The audience actually watches the process happen step by step. We see him practicing launches for hours. We see him studying opponents and adapting to strategies. We see him physically training to improve his control and stamina. And most importantly of all, we see him fail. That's something I think Burst handles incredibly well compared to older Beyblade seasons. Failure is never treated like a temporary inconvenience before the protagonist unlocks a new power-up. Instead, failure is part of the learning process itself. Every major loss changes Valt in some way. His battles against Shu force him to improve technically. His battles against Louis force him to understand power and pressure. And during evolution, competing internationally forces him to mature beyond the level of a local champion. The world around Valt keeps evolving, so he evolves with it. And I think that's where the idea of potential is really important to his character. Valt isn't a character that I think of when I think of the word potential. He's like Goku or Obi-Wan, where in my mind they have potential, sure, but they all had to work so much harder to get it, rather than characters like Broly, Anakin, or Iger, who are just born with massive amounts of power. The series makes it very clear that passion without discipline can only take somebody so far. If Valt wants to stand beside the strongest bladers in the world, he has to earn that position through constant effort. That's why his victories feel meaningful. The audience remembers the failures, especially that loss to Louis at the end of the first season that came before them. When Valt finally reaches the top during the climactic episode of Evolution, it doesn't feel like the story simply decides he should win because he's the protagonist. It feels earned, because the series spends so much time showing every stage of his improvement. And honestly, I think that's one of the most important things about his character. Valt proves that talent matters, but effort is what transforms talent into greatness. His journey is built on repetition, persistence, and the willingness to keep improving no matter how many times he gets knocked down. But while Valt's training helps him to become a stronger blader, I don't think strength is the only thing he gains throughout his time in the spotlight. By the time Evolution begins, Valt's story stops being about just becoming stronger. It becomes about growing up. At the start of Burst, Valt is energetic and passionate, but he's also very immature. He rushes into situations without really thinking, struggling to handle pressure, and often relies purely on instinct rather than understanding the deeper side of competition. But over time, the experiences he goes through slowly start to reshape him. And what makes his growth so effective is how natural it feels. The series doesn't suddenly change Valt into a completely different person. Instead, it allows him to mature while still keeping the same emotional core that made people love him in the first place. That balance, to me, is extremely important. A lot of protagonists become colder and more emotionally distant as they grow stronger. Their maturity comes from becoming more serious, but Valt's maturity comes from understanding himself and others more deeply. You can especially see this during Evolution. As he begins battling stronger opponents around the world, Valt starts carrying expectations that never existed during the original Burst season. He's no longer just an underdog trying to prove himself. Now people look up to him, younger bladers admire him, teammates depend on him. And instead of letting that pressure consume him like it did during the team battles in the first season, Valt slowly learns how to handle it more and more every episode. He becomes more patient during battles and starts analysing opponents more carefully, and because of this, he begins to inspire those around him. A perfect showing of this is with Free. Despite never officially beating him in battle, we see how different Free acts because of Valt's influence. And I think one of the most important parts of his growth is that he never loses his love for Beyblade. That might sound obvious, but it's actually one of the biggest themes in Evolution. Characters like Red Eye represent what happens when the desire to win completely consumes someone emotionally. Free shows us that strength becomes tied to isolation and obsession. And even Louis portrays an arrogance that can only be carried by someone who is used to being at the top. When looking at characters like these, Beyblade stops being something joyful and becomes something destructive. Valt represents the opposite philosophy. He grows stronger without abandoning his humanity. Even at the highest level of competition, he still smiles during battle. He still gets excited. he still treats Beyblade as something that connects people rather than separates them. His final battle with Shu at the end of Evolution shows this perfectly. After Shu had destroyed parts of his bay previously and constantly declares that he would finish him, Valt just asks to have a fun battle in return. That's why his journey feels emotionally satisfying, because he doesn't just become stronger physically, he becomes more complete as a person. And by the end of Evolution, when he finally stands at the very top of the world, it feels earned, not only because of his skill, but because of the person he became along the way. That's what makes Valt such an effective protagonist to me. He isn't just about winning, it's about growing without losing yourself. Remember that everything I've said in this video is ultimately just my own interpretation of the character. Valt Aoi is definitely one of my favourite characters in Burst, and looking back at his journey while making this video only made me appreciate him even more. Whether you see him as a symbol of determination like I do, hard work, or personal growth, or maybe something completely different, I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you agree or disagree with anything I've said, let me know down in the comments and I'll be sure to check them out. If you enjoyed the video, I'd really appreciate it if you left a like, and maybe even subscribe if you're interested in seeing more Burst content in the future. I've got plenty more videos planned and a lot more characters and themes I'd love to dive into. But with all that said, this video took long enough to come out, so I think I'm finally going to wrap things up here. Thank you all so much for watching, and with that, that's game.